Everybody wants power. As much power as you can reasonably cram into a relatively small PC case. Powerful graphics card, high core count CPU, super fast memory, tons of storage space, an overkill cooling solution, and way too many RGB lights. But what does it actually take to make all of these systems run flawlessly, reliably, and sustainably? This, the humble power supply. But how do you choose one? What does it mean to be modular or 80 plus rated? How many watts do you actually need? Let's deep dive into how to choose a power supply right now. What's going on, everyone? My name is Brian, and today I've partnered with Be Quiet to talk all about power supplies. Thank you to them for sending over a giant box full of all of these units that my wife refused to carry in from the front porch because it was too heavy. Everything that we will talk about today will be linked down below in the video description. Now, being a tech YouTuber in the PC space, I quite frequently am asked by viewers to evaluate parts lists, to look at or comment on completed builds, or even just to help make a decision for an upcoming project. The majority of the time, the CPU-GPU combo is relatively balanced, and the chosen memory and motherboard are appropriate for the PC's use case. But by far, the biggest problem that I see in builds is that people choose the wrong power supply. They go too big or too small. They select the wrong efficiency rating for their task. They choose non-modular to save a few bucks, or they choose an off-brand with an unknown reputation. I've always been an advocate for building your systems in as balanced a way as possible. Make sure all of your components make sense within your budget and play nicely with each other. When it comes to choosing a power supply, there are 4 main considerations: wattage, efficiency, modularity, and size. We have 6 different PSUs here on the desk in front of me, and we're going to talk about them from left to right. We'll investigate use cases for each and the kinds of builds that you might want to use them in. First up is Be Quiet's Pure Power FM line, ranging from 550 to 1000 watts, although we have only up to 850 watt here today. These all share very similar physical characteristics and are all 160 millimeters in length. Length is probably the most important size factor in power supply selection, as some cases are very restrictive when it comes to fitment. Although the majority of ATX cases will have no problem with a PSU of this size, it is important to check micro ATX or mini ITX case specifications for clearance. I'd say the Pure Power line is a pretty standard size and even a little more compact than units from some other brands. They also all share the same efficiency rating at 80 plus gold. Now, what is 80 plus and why are their ratings all named after precious metals? 80 plus is not in and of itself an actual rating, even though it does sound like one. 80 plus is a certification program established in 2004, and the ratings themselves are white, bronze, silver, gold, platinum, and titanium. Each rating is associated with a certain level of efficiency. Here's a chart that explains the rating system. For instance, in order for a power supply to be rated gold, it has to run at 90% efficiency when loaded to 50% of its wattage rating. So if you are drawing 225 watts from this Pure Power 550 watt, it has to be at minimum able to operate at 90% efficiency to be able to call itself 80 plus gold rated, and in fact it does at 93.5%. So when you see an 80 plus rating, from now on, just know that it's a good indicator of the quality of components used, although many other factors do go into how a power supply performs, such as capacitor choice and care and construction and soldering. Higher efficiency ratings will mean that you're using less power from the wall, and your energy bills will correspondingly be slightly lower. If you're like me and your PC is on 24/7, the difference between a bronze and a titanium power supply could be, a couple dollars a month. All of the Pure Power line is also fully modular. This refers to the cables that come out and feed the power to individual components in your system. On a non-modular power supply, you get all of these cables permanently attached no matter how many or how few you might actually need. So if you have a simple build that needs the 24-pin, 1 EPS, and 1 PCIe cable, but you have 8 bunches of wires coming out of here, you'll need to find room inside your case to stash that giant cable mess, whereas with a modular unit, you simply just plug in the ones that you need, and the rest can stay in the box. Now let's talk about wattage. You typically shouldn't be looking at anything under 500 watts for any modern build. And in fact, most power supply makers are defaulting now to 500 or 550 watts as their baseline in 2022. The Pure Power FM line steps up in 100-watt increments from 550 to 850 watts and then also jumps up a bit to hit that 1,000-watt mark. But how do you know how much power that you will need? Every component in your system draws power, but the main parts that you should be concerned about are the CPU and the GPU, and maybe to a lesser extent the motherboard and memory. CPU and GPU wattage is fairly easy to calculate, as both components typically will have their power ratings associated with their product listings. For instance, you can look up the Intel i9-12900K and see that at peak load, it'll draw approximately 241 watts, which is a ton for a consumer processor, but you do get a lot for that power ask. Similarly, you can see that an RTX 3090 will pull about 350 watts, meaning that if you team these two up, you already have about 600 watts of power that you'll need to supply without consideration for anything else in your system. There's a fantastic tool on PCPartPicker.com that allows you to plug in your exact system components and it will tell you the total power draw for that build. Now, that doesn't mean that you should see that total and then buy a power supply with that exact spec. In fact, that's kind of asking for trouble. You should probably aim for 100 to 150 watts more to be sure to give yourself some operating headroom. Let's look at some examples of what kinds of builds you might want to use any of these particular power supplies for. The Pure Power 11 FM 550 watt is best in an entry-level build, likely based around an i3 or a Ryzen 3 processor, or maybe a lower-end Ryzen 5 where you won't really be doing any overclocking. Graphics cards should be limited to budget options like the GTX 1650 or AMD 5500 XT, and memory usually will be 16 gigs. Stepping up to the 650 watt Pure Power, it allows us to bump up into the i5 and Ryzen 5 territory with the possibility of overclocking. So this means that you're likely looking at a more substantial motherboard and maybe more memory as well. Toss in an AIO cooler and a more powerful graphics card like an RTX 3060 or 6600 XT, and you have yourself a well-rounded system with enough headroom to tinker with. When we talk Ryzen 7 or Intel i7 based systems, I think starting with the Pure Power 11 750 watt is a safe bet. Processors like the 12700K and 5800X can draw significant amounts of power, especially when overclocked and under full load. A lot of people will be pairing these CPUs with graphics cards like an RTX 3070 or RX 6700 XT, and performing tasks that not only include gaming, but also simultaneously streaming or recording, or maybe video editing, meaning that your entire system could be under full load for significant periods of time. Not to mention that you're probably looking at least 32 gigs of system memory for these types of builds, along with a 360mm cooler, 6+ fans, multiple storage drives, and an RGB display that could light up New York City. The Pure Power 11 FM 850 watt should be reserved for high-end consumer systems. You won't really see anything other than an i9-12900K or Ryzen 9 5950X build need something like this until we get into the high-end desktop realm. My personal system actually uses a 12900K and an RTX 3090 and an 850 watt power supply. It has 64 gigs of memory, 3 SSDs, 7 fans, and a high-end motherboard that draws a significant amount of power. So then, why would you actually need these last two power supplies? Why do they even exist at all? After all, the Pure Power 11 850 puts out the same amount of power as this straight power 11. And I just said that for mainstream builds, you probably won't need more than 850 watts. Well, let's talk straight power first. The straight power 11 provides a few benefits over the similarly spec'd Pure Power. First, it's only 5mm longer at 165mm, but bumps up the efficiency to 80+ platinum, meaning that it's 92% efficient at 50% load. It also provides a 5cm longer cable length to accommodate larger system builds and more connectivity with 11 total modular cables instead of 8. So if you have a bunch of hard drives in a large PC that serves maybe as a media server, this might be the better fit for you. And then we have the Big Daddy, the Dark Power Pro 12 1200 watt. This thing is a beast at 200mm long and a whopping 2.41 kilograms. That's 5.3 pounds to you Americans. It ups the ante to 80+ titanium efficiency, which is the highest rating available, and is almost 95% efficient at 50% load. It also comes with individually sleeved, fully modular cables and a ton of them. You get 17 total power cables in the box here, which can allow you to do SLI setups with multiple 3090s or Quadro cards. You also have the flexibility to be able to run the setups based on the Threadripper, Epic, or Xeon platforms, given the high wattage allowance. These HEDT or server systems can often run up to 256 gigs of memory, multiple GPUs, and complicated cooling setups. I actually used one of these when I built my complete overkill editing rig with a Threadripper 3970X and two RTX 3090s. For most consumers, this is admittedly overkill, but these products exist for a reason, and system builders certainly need power supplies like the Dark Power 12 in some instances. So I hope this video did give you a better idea of how to choose a power supply and what kind of wattage your prospective system might actually need. Once again, I want to give a big thank you to Be Quiet for sponsoring this video. You can check out links to all of these products down below in the description. Thanks again for watching, guys, and I'll catch you next time.